The lit cigarette struck my tunic just below the third brass button, and for the length of one heartbeat I watched a thin curl of smoke rise off the red wool an inch from my chin. I did not look down. I did not brush it away. I stood as I had been trained to stand for 19 years, eyes level on the middle distance, rifle at the shoulder, and I let the small orange ember burn its little hole in the cloth over my heart, while a man in a linen jacket the color of cream laughed at me from 4 feet away. You should understand something before I tell you the rest. Behind the face you would have seen that afternoon, the face that did not move, I was counting. I count when the storm comes. It is the only thing I permit myself. I had reached 14 before the ember went out against the dampness of the wool, and I had reached 26 before the man in the cream jacket decided I had not given him enough. "Did you feel that?" he said. He leaned in so close I could smell the cologne and the wine on him, expensive both, the kind a man wears when he wants the whole forecourt to know what he can afford. "I know you felt that. Everybody saw it." He felt it. The crowd had gone the particular kind of quiet that is worse than noise. 40, 50 tourists in summer clothes, phones already lifting, 100 small black rectangles turning toward us like sunflowers toward the light. It was the 3rd week of July, and the heat came up off the cobblestones in shimmers. My collar was wet through. The bearskin sat on my head like a second sun. And a stranger had just put fire to the king's uniform on the king's own ground, and the king's man had done nothing, and that nothing was the most interesting thing in the world to 50 people with cameras. I want to be precise about what I was, because the whole of it turns on that. I was a sentry of the household, posted at the south pillar of the Ironbridge Gate, the forecourt of Comore Palace, a place that does not exist on any map you own, in a kingdom I will not name because the naming would make you think of the wrong things. What matters is the post. The post is older than the man standing it. When I took my oath at 22, a color sergeant with a voice like a closing door told me the only thing I ever truly needed to know: the uniform is not yours. You are borrowing it. Hand it back the way you found it. I had handed it back clean every single night for 19 years. I intended to hand it back clean that night too, cigarette burn and all. "He's not even real," the man said, half to me and half to the woman beside him who had the grace at least to look uncomfortable. "Look at him. They put a mannequin out here, a doll." He flicked his fingers an inch from my eyes. I did not blink. He liked that even less than the staring. Some men, when they cannot move you, only push harder. I had met 100 of him in 19 years. I have learned to know the type the way a farmer knows weather. There is a pressure that comes before the worst of it, and I felt that pressure standing off the man in the cream jacket like heat off a stove. His name, I would learn later that night, was a name that meant something in 3 countries and nothing at all on those cobblestones. He had arrived that morning on a yacht with a registry I could not pronounce, and a temper he had clearly never once been asked to govern. He had spent the morning being told no by a maitre d', by a curator at a gallery that did not open early for private viewings, by a driver who would not exceed the posted speed. By the time he reached my gate, a whole day of small refusals had stacked up in him like floodwater behind a wall, and he had found, at last, a man in a tall fur hat who was not permitted to refuse him anything, or so he believed. That is the thing the cream jacket did not know. That is the thing almost none of them know. They think the stillness is helplessness. They think a man who will not strike back is a man who cannot. They look at the white gloves and the polished toe caps and the rifle held just so, and they decide it is all costume, all show, a doll for the tourists, and that they may do as they please to it. And for a few minutes on a hot afternoon in front of 50 phones, they are right. The discipline holds the line precisely, so that the law can do the rest. I am not the wall. I am the place the wall is built on. There is a difference, and the man in the cream jacket was about to learn it the hard way. "Salute me," he said. I held the middle distance. I said, "Salute me," louder now for the crowd, his voice climbing the way a bully's voice climbs when the audience is what he's actually performing for. You salute important people. I'm important. Do you know who I am? He named himself then. Said it the way a man lays down a winning card. I had never heard the name. It landed on me and slid off like rain off the bearskin. And I think he saw that the name that opened every door he had ever stood in front of had no purchase here at all. And something behind his eyes turned mean in a way that was no longer about me. He reached up and knocked the chin strap of my bearskin with 2 fingers. A small thing, a schoolyard thing. But the bearskin shifted a 1/4 inch and the whole crowd drew a breath at once, that sharp collective inhale, and I felt the cost of stillness right then more than I had felt the ember. 19 years of training is a rope you hold with both hands, and the rope was singing. I counted, I had reached 41. What I have never been able to make people understand, my wife included, God bless her patience, is that the stillness is not absence. It is the hardest work I have ever done. Every muscle in me wanted to step off the line, not to harm him. I want to be clear about that then and now and always. I had no wish to harm the man. But to step off the line, to plant my boots and turn my face down on his and let him see, just once, the soldier under the ceremony, that wish was enormous, and I held it. And holding it was like holding a door shut against a flood with your whole body while the water finds every crack. Because here is what they never put on the postcards. We are not statues. We are men, picked and trained and sworn, and the post we stand is a covenant. The public may come close, may gawk, may photograph, may even mock, and we will not lift a hand, because the moment a sentry lifts a hand in anger the covenant breaks, and the gate is no longer a gate. It is just a man with a temper and a rifle. The whole point of me is that I do not break. The whole point of the law behind me is that it does, in my place, with cuffs and charges and a magistrate, in its own slow and certain time. So I let him knock my hat. I let him laugh. I let him flick a second cigarette. He lit a second one right there, and I watched the lighter snap and the small flame catch, and I counted, and I waited for the sergeant of the relief, who I knew, by the angle of the sun and the rhythm of the day, was already walking toward the Iron Bridge gate with 2 constables and a question on his face. The cream jacket had perhaps 4 minutes left in which he was the most important man in the world. He had no idea. I almost pitied him, almost. The second cigarette he did not flick. He held it. That was worse, somehow, the deliberation of it. He stepped to my left shoulder. Out of the polite distance, the public keeps even when they are being rude. And he brought the lit end up slow and laid it almost against the cuff of my white glove. Close enough that I could feel the heat of it through the cotton. Close enough that I understood he meant to burn me and was only waiting to see if I would flinch first and give him the excuse to call it my fault. I did not flinch. I have a scar on the inside of that wrist to this day, a small pale comma of old burn, and I do not regret it, because a flinch then would have cost more than skin. A flinch would have given him a story. The guard moved on me. The guard came at me. I was defending myself. I had seen that story spun before, by smaller men than him, and I had watched a good sentry lose his post to it. So I let the heat find me and I counted, and the count was the only thing in the whole burning world that belonged to me alone. 48-49. Nothing, he said, wondering now almost to himself. There is nothing in there. And he laughed again, but the laugh had changed. It had gone thin. A man who pushes and pushes against a thing that will not move starts eventually to be afraid of it, though he could not have told you why. The crowd felt it before he did. I heard a woman near the railing say, "Lo, somebody should stop him," and a man's voice answer, "Lower, don't get near it." They meant the situation. They might as well have meant me. I had become, to 50 strangers, a kind of weather they did not want to be standing under when it broke. What none of them could see was the gate behind me, and the gate is the whole truth of this. 40 feet to my rear, past the gilded railing, the forecourt opens onto the carriage road, and along that road, every hour on the hour and at irregular times besides, the household moves relief sentries, the orderly officer, the mounted picket, sometimes a carriage, Sometimes nothing at all but a single sergeant making his rounds with a watch in his pocket and a memory like a ledger. The man in the cream jacket saw a doll alone at a pillar. I saw the clockwork of a thing 200 years old turning steadily toward him, and I knew, the way you know the tide, that it was already too late for him to be sorry in time. He pressed the cigarette harder against my glove. And then a small voice, high, clear, a boy's voice, 8 or 9 years old, somewhere off to my right at the foot of the railing, said, Mister, why are you hurting him? He's not allowed to hurt you back. I want to tell you about that boy because he is the hinge of the whole afternoon, though he never touched a thing. He had been there a while. I had clocked him the way I clock everyone in my arc, a small figure in a striped shirt, a paper crown from some gift shop tipped on his head, holding the hand of a grandmother who was fanning herself with a guidebook. He had been watching me the way children watch the guard, with that open seriousness children have, working out the rules of the world. And he had worked this one out before any of the adults with their phones. He's not allowed to hurt you back. Out of the mouth of a boy in a paper crown came the exact shape of the covenant, the thing the cream jacket had been counting on, and the thing he had never once stopped to be ashamed of. The man turned toward the boy. Mind your business, kid. That's not fair, though, the boy said, not backing up, in that flat, unanswerable way children have. He can't move. You shouldn't do things to people who can't move. The grandmother pulled gently at his hand and the boy let himself be pulled, but he kept his eyes on the man, and his small face had gone tight with the particular outrage of a child who has just seen, perhaps for the first time, a grown man choose to be cruel on purpose. Something happened in the crowd then. It is hard to describe, and I have thought about it many times since. The boy had said out loud the thing they were all feeling, and none of them had found the nerve to say. And once it was said, it could not be unsaid. And 50 people who had been filming a spectacle remembered, all at once, that they were watching a man be tormented because he had sworn not to defend himself. The phones did not go down. But the mood under them turned, the way a room turns, and the cream jacket, who lived and breathed on the approval of the room, felt the floor shift under him and did not understand why. Somebody control their child, he said, looking around for an ally and finding none. This is harassment, what he's saying to me. No one answered him. The grandmother said quietly to the boy, You're right, love, you're quite right. But come stand by me now. And the boy came and stood by her, and went on watching with his arms folded over the front of his striped shirt, a small magistrate in a paper crown, and I confess that behind my unmoving face I loved that boy in that moment more than I could have told you. He had given the crowd back its conscience, and a man who is performing for a crowd is finished the moment the crowd remembers it has won. The cream jacket knew he was losing the room. He could not have said it in those words, but he felt it, and a man like that, when he feels the room turning, does the worst possible thing. He reaches for a bigger gesture to win it back. He looked at me, and he looked at the rifle held at my shoulder, polished and proper and pointing at nothing but the sky. And I saw the idea cross his face the way you see a cloud's shadow cross a field, and I knew before he moved what he was going to do, and I knew it was the thing that would end him. Let's see if the doll defends his little toy gun, he said. And he reached for my rifle. Now, there are things a sentry permits and things a sentry does not, and the line between them is not pride and it is not temper, it is the post. He may insult me. He may crowd me. He may, God help him, burn me, and I will stand and count and let the law come at its own pace. But the weapon is not mine to surrender, and it is not his to touch. And the instant his fingers closed on the foregrip, the whole nature of the afternoon changed, not in my heart, which stayed exactly as still and as disciplined as it had been at button 3, but in law and in duty, and in what I was not only permitted but required to do. I had reached 63. I stopped counting. What I did next took less than 2 seconds, and I have replayed it 1,000 times to be sure I did it right, and I did. There is a drill for exactly this. There is a drill for everything. That is what people mean when they call it discipline, though they imagine it is mostly about standing still. It is not. The standing still is the easy part. The drill is for the 2 seconds when standing still is no longer the thing the post requires. I brought the rifle up and across, a single hard movement, the butt rising, the whole weapon turning in my grip to come between his hand and itself, and I shouted one word, the challenge word, the only word a sentry is permitted to raise and the loudest thing those cobblestones had heard all day. It cracked across the forecourt like a board breaking. 50 people jumped. The cream jacket jumped worse than any of them. His fingers came off the foregrip as though it had turned to a stovetop, and he stumbled back 2 steps with his hands rising, not in surrender. He didn't have the wit for surrender yet, but in the pure animal startle of a man who has finally, after a whole day of pushing, met a thing that pushed back. I did not strike him. I want that on the record as plainly as I can put it, because half the phones in that forecourt later told it wrong, and the truth matters more than the view count. I did not lay a hand or a rifle on the man. I brought my weapon to the guard position between him and the means to do harm, and I gave the challenge, and then I stepped 3 crisp paces, a sentry's pace, no faster, back to the precise spot my boots had stood for the last 2 hours, and I came once more to the shoulder arms, eyes level, face still, the whole storm of it locked back down behind the discipline as if it had never cracked at all. That stillness, returning so fast and so complete, frightened him more than the shout had. I saw it. I have seen it before. It is one thing to provoke a man until he yells. Every bully in the world has done that and learned nothing from it. It is another thing entirely to provoke a man into a single, exact, controlled response, and then watch him fold himself back into perfect order the very next second, because it tells you, even if you are not bright, even if you have spent your whole life being obeyed, that the yelling was never the limit of what he could do. It was the floor. You have just seen the floor, and you do not suddenly want to find the ceiling. You came at me, the cream jacket said. His voice had lost its music. You all saw it. He came at me with the gun. He didn't, though, said the boy in the paper crown before any adult could. You grabbed it. I saw. You grabbed his gun and he made you stop. That's his job. The flat, unanswerable child's logic again, and this time a dozen voices in the crowd murmured agreement, because a dozen phones had it recorded, and the people holding them knew exactly what their own footage showed. The cream jacket looked from face to face and found, in everyone, the same verdict the boy had handed down, and for the first time that whole long afternoon, I watched the certainty go out of him. It was at that moment, as if the day itself had been waiting for its cue, that I heard the sound I had been listening for under everything else. Boots on cobblestone, 2 pairs and then a third, measured, unhurried, coming up the carriage road from the direction of the guardroom. The relief. The sergeant of the gate, a square gray man named Aldous Wren, who had stood this same forecourt 20 years before me, and had a memory for faces that the palace half believed was a kind of witchcraft. With him, 2 constables of the palace police in their dark tunics, and behind them, drawn by the noise of my challenge, the orderly officer of the day, a young lieutenant named Caro with his cap under his arm and a frown already gathering. The cream jacket heard them too. He turned. And here is the thing about men who have spent a lifetime being important. They cannot stop performing even when the smart thing, the only thing, would be to go quiet. He saw the uniforms coming, and he did not see his rescue from a situation he had lost. He saw an audience that outranked the tourists, a better room to play. He squared himself and lifted his chin and started toward Sergeant Wren with his hand out and his grievance already loaded. Officer, good. This man, a contemptuous jerk of the head at me, this man assaulted me, threatened me with a weapon in front of all these people. I want him removed. I want his name. Do you have any idea who I am? Sergeant Wren stopped about 6 feet from him. He did not take the offered hand. He looked at the man's face, and then, slowly, The way a surveyor reads a wall for the crack that will bring it down, he looked past him at me. At the small black-edged hole in my tunic below the third button, at the scorch on the cuff of my white glove, at the chin strap sitting a quarter-inch out of true on the bearskin where 2 fingers had knocked it. Ren had stood the post. Ren could read a tunic the way other men read a paragraph, and the tunic told him the whole story before a single witness opened a mouth. "Sentry," Ren said to me not loudly, "the forms must be observed. Report." "Sergeant." My voice came out flat and even, the duty voice, 19 years deep. This man applied a lit cigarette to my tunic and to my person, struck my headdress, and attempted to take hold of my weapon. I issued the challenge and resumed my post. I did not strike him. "You did not strike him," Ren repeated. "No, Sergeant." "Anyone touch this man?" Ren said, raising his voice now, turning it out toward the crowd, and it was a sergeant's voice, the kind that does not invite an answer so much as collect one. "Anyone here see this sentry lay a hand on that gentleman? Speak up. There's 50 cameras say one way or the other." A silence. Then the boy's grandmother of all of them stepped to the railing with her guidebook still in her hand and said, clear as a bell, "No. No one touched him. He set fire to that young man's coat and grabbed at his rifle, and the soldier shouted and stepped back, and that was the whole of it." My grandson saw it plainer than any of us. And the boy nodded hard under his paper crown, and around the forecourt the phones came up, not filming now but offering. Faces turning their screens toward the sergeant. "Here, look, I have it. I have it from the start." And Sergeant Aldous Wren looked at the man in the cream jacket with an expression I had seen perhaps 3 times in 20 years and would not have wished on a decent man for anything. But the cream jacket was not a decent man, not that day, and he had still not understood the country he was standing in. "These people are mistaken," he said, "or they're lying, and I'll have a word with each of their consulates about it. I am a guest of considerable standing in this city, and I will not be." "You'll be quiet now, sir," Wren said, not loud. He never once raised it past the level a man uses to read a list. "You'll be quiet, and you'll put your hands where the constable can see them, and you'll mind that everything you say from this breath forward is being recorded by yourself and 40 strangers besides. You set fire to a sentry of the household on royal ground. You assaulted him about the head. You laid hands on a service weapon at a guarded gate of this palace. He let each one fall like a stone into a well. I have stood that pillar, sir. I know to the inch what it costs a man to do nothing while you did all that. And I'll tell you for free, the doing nothing is the only reason you're walking to the guardroom on your own feet and not being carried. I would like to tell you the man went quietly then, the way the law and good sense both demanded. He did not. A lifetime of getting his way is a hard habit to break in one afternoon on foreign cobblestones, and he reached, as drowning men reach, for the only rope he had ever known. "Do you know what I'm worth?" he said, his voice cracked up out of its register. "I can buy this gate. I can buy your job, Sergeant, and his job, that jerk of the head at me again, and the building you sleep in. Name a figure, right now. We make this go away, all of it, and nobody's the worse. That's how the world works. That's how it has always worked." And he reached into the breast of the cream jacket, and for one bad half-second 3 trained men tensed because we did not yet know what his hand was going for, and it came out holding not a weapon but a checkbook, a slim leather checkbook, and a pen. And he uncapped the pen with his teeth and held it poised over the paper and looked up at Sergeant Wren with the awful confidence of a man who has never once met a thing that money could not move. I have thought about that checkbook more than almost anything else from that day, because in that gesture was the whole of his error, laid bare for 50 cameras. He had spent the afternoon certain that my stillness meant I could be bought, that everything could be bought, that a man who would not strike back was simply a man waiting to be paid. And here, at the end, with the constables already at his elbows, his instinct was still the same, to reach for the wallet, because in his world the wallet had never failed. He genuinely did not understand that he had walked into the one place on earth built, stone by stone and oath by oath, to be the thing money cannot move. The post is not for sale. That is the entire point of the post. He might as well have offered to buy the tide. "Put that away, sir," Wren said, and there was something almost gentle in it now, the way you might speak to a man who has just done something that has finished him and does not yet know it. "Put it away. You've added a great deal to the morning's account with that, and I'd not have you add more." The young lieutenant, Caro, stepped in then, and to his great credit he did it by the book and without a flicker of relish. He nodded to the constables. They took the man by the arms, not roughly. I want that recorded too. The whole of the household's answer to this man was from first to last measured, and they drew his hands behind him, and the cuffs went on with a small bright sound that carried, in the new quiet, all the way to the railing. The checkbook fell to the cobblestones. Nobody picked it up. And the man in the cream jacket, finally, at the very last, understood. I watched it arrive in his face. The whole architecture of his certainty came down at once. The way a building comes down when the right support is pulled, all of it falling inward into a small, stunned silence. And what was left standing in the wreckage was just a frightened middle-aged man on his way to a holding cell in a country whose language he did not speak, who had set fire to a soldier for sport in front of the entire world and could not now, with all his money, buy back the last 20 minutes. The crowd did not cheer. I have been grateful for that ever since. There was no jeering, no triumph. The boy's grandmother had set the tone and the forecourt kept it. What there was instead was a long exhale, 50 people letting go a breath they had been holding for the better part of half an hour, and then a strange and solemn sort of murmur, and a thing I did not expect. A man near the railing, gray-haired, ramrod straight, with the unmistakable bearing of an old soldier of some country or other, came stiffly to attention and brought his hand up to his brow in a salute, not to the constables, not to the sergeant, but to me, holding it crisp and steady while the cream jacket was walked past him toward the guardroom. And then another man did it. And then the boy in the paper crown, watching the grown-ups, lifted his own small hand to the side of his head in a clumsy, fierce, perfect salute, and held it. I could not return it. A sentry at his post does not. But I will tell you that 19 years of training very nearly failed me in that moment in a way an entire afternoon of fire and insult had not come close to managing, and it was all I could do to keep my eyes level on the middle distance, and my face the face the post requires while a boy in a paper crown saluted me across the cobblestones of the Iron Bridge gate. I held the line, but it cost me. The good things always do. They walked the man away. The forecourt slowly came back to itself, the way a forest comes back to its noises after something large has passed through. Sergeant Wren took down the grandmother's name, and the old soldiers and a dozen others who pressed forward now, eager, with their footage and their accounts. I have it from the very first cigarette, Sergeant. You'll want mine asterisk. And the young Lieutenant Caro came and stood in front of me, just for a moment out of the line of the cameras. You held, he said, quietly. It was not quite a question. I held, sir. How long had he been at you? A while, sir. I did not give him the count. The count is mine, but I will tell you since you have come this far with me. From the first cigarette below the third button to the constable's cuffs, it was 11 minutes. 11 minutes is not a long time. You have spent longer than that reading this. But I have stood watches through the cold, black middle of winter nights that passed easier than those 11 minutes in the July heat. And any sentry who has stood his own version of those 11 minutes will know exactly what I mean and will need no further explaining, and the rest of you will have to take it on faith. You'll need to come off the post for the report, Caro said. I'll have your relief up directly. The burn on your wrist, get that seen to. It's nothing, sir. Get it seen to anyway. He almost smiled. He did not, because a lieutenant of the day does not smile on the forecourt, but it was there at the edge of him, and he turned smartly and went to see about my relief, and I stood my pillar a few minutes more, alone now. The storm passed, the cigarette burn over my heart and the scorch on my cuff and the chin strap a quarter-inch out of true, the small honest damage of having done the job exactly right. while the tourists, gentler now, took their photographs and went their way. The rest of it I learned in pieces, the way a sentry learns most things second-hand in the guardroom over the long, slow days after. I will give it to you the way it came to me, because the order is part of the lesson. That night the man in the cream jacket sat in a holding cell beneath the very forecourt he had thought he could buy, and he made his calls. A man of his standing always has calls to make. He called his lawyers and his consulate and a friend who knew a man who knew a minister, and he was, I am told, perfectly confident even then that the machinery would turn for him as it had always turned, that a charge for a few cigarettes and a raised voice would dissolve in the warm water of money and influence by morning. He did not understand what he had actually done. He had filed it in his own mind under asterisk misunderstanding. The law had it filed under 3 separate headings, and not one of them was small. Because here is the part the cream jacket never grasped, standing at my pillar with his lighter and his checkbook. The man he had been tormenting was, in law, almost beside the point. I am a symbol, yes, but a symbol of a real thing, and the real thing has teeth. To set fire to a sentry of the household is not a prank. It is an assault on a man on protected duty, and the courts of that kingdom take a hard and ancient view of it. To strike the headdress is the same. But to lay hands on a service weapon at a guarded royal gate, that is the one that does not bend, the one no minister will touch and no consulate will go near, because it is not really about the man at all. It is about the gate, and what a gate is for, and what it would mean if the gate could be made to yield to anyone with enough nerve and enough money. The whole point of me, you will remember, is that I do not break. The whole point of the law behind me is that it does not break either. He had spent 11 minutes testing the first, and then, in his last act of arrogance, reached out and tested the second, and the second answered him with the full and patient weight of 200 years. The footage did the rest, and it did it without any help from me. By the next morning there was not one account of those 11 minutes circulating in the world but 40, shot from every angle the forecourt allowed, and they agreed with each other in every particular, because for once the cameras had caught a true thing and there was no spinning it. There was the cigarette below the 3rd button. There was the second one held to my glove. There was the hand reaching for the rifle, plain as print, and there was the sentry bringing his weapon up between that hand and itself and not 1 inch further, and stepping back to his post and standing. And there, in account after account, was the boy in the paper crown saying the thing the whole world then said back to itself for a week. He's not allowed to hurt you back. The man who had been so certain the cameras were his weapon found that they had been the patient witnesses against him all along. The humiliation he had tried to hand me, in front of 50 strangers, came home to his own door multiplied by the whole watching world, and he had filmed the first frame of it himself. He was tried in the autumn. I gave my evidence in the flat duty voice and stepped down, and I did not look at him, and I have no notion to this day whether he looked at me. The court was unmoved by the calls he had made and the figures he had named, and it said so, in language a good deal colder than mine. He did not go to prison. The kingdom is not a cruel one, and his counsel, in the end, was wise enough to stop fighting the river and let him plead. But he was fined a sum that would have made even him wince, and he was barred from the kingdom for a term of years, walked onto a plane under escort and sent home a smaller man than the one who had stepped off the yacht, and the record of it followed him into every important room he ever tried to enter again, because that is the nature of a thing the whole world has watched. He had wanted, more than anything, to be known. He got his wish. He is known. It is only that he is known for the 11 minutes he spent setting fire to a man who would not be moved, and there is no checkbook on earth thick enough to buy that back. As for me, I had my wrist seen to, and the medical officer dressed the small burn and told me dryly that I would live, and I went back on the post 3 days later with a new tunic and the same oath. The old tunic, the one with the black-edged hole below the 3rd button, I asked to keep, and after some discussion they let me. It hangs in my house. My wife wanted to mend the hole and I asked her not to. I look at it sometimes. The small, honest mark of the one afternoon a man put fire to the uniform, and the uniform did not flinch. And it reminds me of the only thing that color sergeant ever truly taught me, the only thing that matters in the end. The uniform is not mine. I am only borrowing it. And on the worst afternoon of my 19 years, with the whole world watching and a man doing his level best to make me break the covenant and hand the gate to him, I borrowed it well, and I handed it back clean. People ask me, now that the story has made the rounds and I am a little famous for it in the quiet way a sentry can be, whether I was afraid out there or angry or proud. They want the drama of it. I understand. But the truth is smaller and harder than any of those, and it is the only thing I have to give you, so I will give it to you straight, the way Sergeant Wren gives everything. I was not afraid, and I was not proud, and the anger I felt was a tool and not a master. What I was, those 11 minutes, was exactly what I had sworn to be, no more and no less, and that turned out to be enough. It is always enough. That is the whole secret of the post, the thing the man in the cream jacket spent a fortune and a reputation to learn and learned too late. The world is full of men who can be moved by fire, by insult, by money, by a crowd. The strong ones look just like the others, right up until the afternoon someone tries to move them and finds they cannot be. I stood my pillar. I held the line. The law came in its own slow and certain time and did the rest. And the next morning and every morning since, the Iron Bridge gate of Comore Palace opened the way it has opened for 200 years, guarded and unbroken, and not for sale to any man alive.